Tombstone is currently getting rebuilt so we can be ready for our BattleBots Faceoffs match later this year. So we've got a few upgrades and updates that I want to do to the robot to get it ready, so I can be the most competitive we can be when we get there. And one of the key things that I'm going to have to address is the way our battery and power system is laid out. We've had some issues in the past with an occasional bit of a fire for the battery setup. And I think most of those problems have come from the fact that they're just not quite being held as securely as they need to be. And so one of the things that we've done in some of the other robots is we've come up with a different way of mounting and holding the batteries that has worked really well in our middleweight Mortician. So I'm going to move that sort of setup up into Tombstone. And so this is the layout of how we're going to set things up for later this year. The battery compartment for Tombstone has always been in the rear of the robots, kind of mostly protected there, and it also puts the weight of the batteries back behind the tires to help balance it for drive. And the way we've set this up previously was this area in the back would be full of batteries all the way across there, and then there would be closed cell foam between the cells and against the frame to sort of protect it for shock absorption. And for years, that worked just fine. In fact, we won a couple of championships that way. The problem is now the hits are so hard, things will move around in there quite a bit. And even though it's held in closed cell foam, they're slamming into the steel of the battery compartment, pushing through the closed cell foam and denting the battery cells. And I believe that our fire issues have been physically related to the impacts to those batteries. So we're going to try to figure out a way to make that not be an issue anymore. The upgraded system that we're going to be using are these 3D printed battery boxes. 3D printing is an unbelievably useful tool for combat robots because if you can design it, you can make it. You can make things that would be really difficult to machine. You can just design it in CAD and have the printer print it for you. So these are what we've been using in some of the other robots over the last couple of years, and they've worked really well. So one of the key things for this is printed material. This is TPU. It's actually kind of flexible, okay? And the flexibility is super important because the batteries, as they get warm while they're being used, they'll actually tend to swell a little bit. So you want to hold the battery securely, but you want to have the ability for it to be able to take into account that it might swell up a little bit during use. Also, set in basically a shock-mounted system should protect the batteries, but hold them securely to keep them from moving around. And like I said, this has worked really well with the middleweight Mortician, so we're going to give that a shot this time around with Tombstone, and I think this will definitely be an improvement on how we've done things in the past. So here we have a bare Tombstone frame. And back here is where I'm going to mount these new battery boxes. And I've already drilled the holes in the bottom armor plate for those battery boxes to mount into. We may still have to, there'll be bolts coming up through them, but there's no real support across the top, so I might have to weld in a tab or two to help support them across the top. But let's get them in there and see what they look like. These will be the batteries we'll be using for Tombstone this time around. So we're going to have 8 of the 6500 6-cell packs in series parallel to have 12 cell feeding the weapon. And then a larger 9,000 milliamp hour 6-cell pack feeding the drivetrain and the electronics. So obviously for Tombstone, the biggest draw comes from the weapon, so that's why we have so many more packs to feed it. I'd mentioned in a previous video how I was going to use 2 contactors to cut the load on them to turn on the weapon. Now this is my custom 3D mount for those. And again, this stuff is made out of TPU, so should provide some shock absorption and should hold them securely. In case you're interested in any of the hardcore gear that the team wears, all of our items are now available on our web store, and there is a link below. So there's the contactors mounted up in their TPU mount. So this is hard mounted to the frame, but with the flexibility in the TPU, I think those will be fine. For the electronic speed controllers, I'm going to shock mount those away from the frame here on a plate. The speed controllers are going to mount like this, so they're shock isolated away from the frame, so there's a little bit of motion there to protect them. And you should always try to find some shock isolation for your electronics. It really does help with the huge shock loads. At least it does with the shock loads that I routinely see. I'm actually pretty happy with this layout. I still have plenty of space because the drive motor sits something like yay, so this side will be a little closer. I'll have a ton of space on that side, so everything should be fine there. These should be mounted significantly more solid than they have been in the past. They still have a pretty good gap between the back armor panel and the actual battery boxes, so that if I get clipped on that back armor panel, it shouldn't push in to the batteries, which has been a source of a couple of my fires. So I think when this is all said and done, this should be a pretty dependable layout as far as the power arrangements go for the robot. So now all I need to do is finish up the little bit of welding I'm going to do, and then start making a new wiring harness for it to get it all ready to go. So there you have a sneak peek at the new battery layout for Tombstone. Hopefully we get past all those fires. I don't want to be catching on fire anymore. I think this will be a better layout for what we're going to do, so I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. But of course, we're really going to find out when we get it in the arena and we have some of the toughest opponents facing us. So it's going to be a tough weekend when we're fighting. Our matches are going to be November 1st through 3rd at the BattleBots Las Vegas location. There'll be a link below so you can check out, get some tickets if you want to come watch. That'll be fun. And follow along. We got further work to do here, so I'm going to obviously have to finish up the wiring to get this all set up. I got some frame modifications to move the drivetrain around. So there's a lot of work ahead to get Tombstone ready to rock and roll. And so I'm going to try to document and post all of it online for you. So keep watching.